Hey everyone, I'm Kunal Bajwa.
And I'm Lance Jordan.
We are two nerds who decided to start a podcast in 2020 due to the pandemic. No topic is necessarily off the table, and we'd like you to join us in hearing our thoughts on various topics, ranging from anime to Zeppelins. We have it all. Here we go. Hey guys, thanks for joining us. Guess who's back? Your favorite two podcast hosts.
Back again, like we never left.
It's like Dr. Dre and Slim Shady.
That's right.
I don't know which one of us is Slim Shady. Probably me, because you'd be Dre. But
you're a little problematic.
Ooh, shots fired. Okay. We're done now. The episode's done.
You're walking off.
Slim Shady. Oh boy. I like his music though. He's fun. He can be problematic at times, but that's beside. Okay, we're gonna stay on topic. Whenever we interview each other, we've tried to make it a point of interviewing the other person. That's just kind of how it's been. So today we get to talk about Lance and how he has done something called asset protection, which is not what I thought it was at first. I thought it was just about using guns, but apparently that is
using guns.
Guns. I mean, you're protecting your ass. That's what you do.
Hey, sometimes I do feel like that. Like I need a gun to protect my own ass. My ass has been threatened, but we'll get into that later.
I'm excited. I'm also glad you're okay at the same time.
Yeah, I'm glad my ass is okay.
Okay, I'm glad it is too. All right, well, let's get off right in the bat. So to clear up my confusion that I had before I did this, and our listeners' confusion, could you define what asset protection is in your own words?
Yeah, I mean, after that brilliant intro, I think, that's a good question.
Thank you.
So a cliche as it sounds, asset protection essentially is in the name. It's a protection of the company's assets. You'll find asset protection jobs, postings, professionals. You'll find them mostly in retail companies, such as the ones I've worked at, Macy's, Home Depot, Marshall's. There's plenty others, Walmart. And so essentially, we've been called by many names. So security officers, secret shoppers.
Just makes it sound like the League of Shadows. We've been called by many names.
We have. I mean, I've heard them all, secret shoppers, They're not wrong. It's like a kind of it's all wrapped into one in a way. Okay.
You said it's not wrong to call you a security guard.
It's not necessarily wrong, depending on what company you work for. To kind of go further into it, at least in the state of Missouri, you still have to be licensed as a security guard, essentially.
Okay.
You still got to go through the process, go through St. Louis County and city to get a license to say you can practice security in our state. Where it kind of differentiates from a security guard, as you know, most security guards have a uniform.
Yes.
That's how you identify them. That's what makes them stand out. For us, there's exemptions to where we get to wear plain clothes. For the companies I've worked at, there have been no such thing as a uniform. It's just come dressed as a shopper.
Oh, so that's what they mean by secret shoppers.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's where we get those names because secret shoppers are something totally different. Those are guys who legit shop for the company to prove the associates are bad at their jobs. But we're more so, we're blending in, pretending like we're shoppers to catch the bad guys, essentially, in the retail world, which is, there's a lot of bad guys in the retail world. Like, when I first got into it, I would have never imagined it was as big as it is.
I worked at GameStop, both at the Galleria and at Maplewood, and we definitely needed some secret shoppers there because there was times it got weird. But that's for a different day. Before we go a little further, I've heard people who are security officers that go through Garda World. Mm-hmm. And I was like that. Do they kind of blend in with your circles or not so much?
Sometimes. So, I actually did when I was at Marshall's to kind of jump into that time period. I was there between 2017 and 18.
Okay.
And during the holiday, we did hire, an outside security company to put a visual guard at our door. That's kind of how our worlds intersected there. But, with Macy's being a mall retailer, sometimes we would overlap with mall security and, kind of piggyback off them. They give us some information, we give them some information. But it's very limited in how much you actually work with them because there's liability there. As you can imagine, these big corporations want to, make sure they're not liable to being sued. So I could say, Kunal just walked out with this shirt. He's a thief. But, I didn't do anything to stop you in our store. And then you go to some other store in the mall and mall security's following you. They're saying, well, Macy said you were, a thief. And so things like that kind of get tricky. So we partner with them sometimes, but it's very limited on what we actually do.
Okay, cool. So we talked a little bit about this, but when I was researching for this, it says that you have to provide strong customer service. And what I'm gleaning for what you're saying is that it's more of trying to be as professional as you can to deter people.
Yeah. When they say provide strong customer service, I do think of, and I think you had this point on here, you think of the cashiers and the sales associates.
Right, which is why I was very confused.
Yeah. So they actually, this is my experience, and hopefully others who listen to this can chime in who have worked in the world. But they are the ones that provide the strong customer service. Now, with Macy's, we actually had something called visual security guards. Mm-hmm. Well, visual security officers who worked for Macy's but wore jackets or polos that said security. And sometimes even if you go into a certain Target, you'll see the guys with I think they're polos, the blue polos with Target security on them.
Yeah.
Those guys can provide that strong customer service because their security, and sometimes they're at the front, they're the first person you see who can direct people to where things are, or a lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen videos online, there's groups of people with an arm full of stuff or a cart with a new flat screen TV pushing it to the front. And then you would want those guys to be like, hey, you're looking for a register, you need someone to hold that for you. Let me take it over here and, things like that. But to your point, I think what you were alluding to is what we call in the world either deterring theft or burning someone.
Yeah, because it's you don't want to be accusatory, but you also want to protect the merchandise of what you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes you can do that many different ways that won't create too much liability. Sometimes it's speaking into your radio or, letting them know that you work there. That way they'll sometimes stop. Just creating a presence in the area. Sometimes you can stop theft by just showing up, just being a body in a certain spot where people are like, I'm trying to do something, but the guy won't leave. And sometimes they'll get the hint and leave.
Okay, cool. So I think this begs the question of everything. How'd you get into this?
I actually put this point down because I really wanted to reinforce this. That is actually a funny story that revolves around rejection and a woman,
Been there.
Everything does. So at the time I was working actually as a bar porter at the casino. For those who don't know what that is, or
I was just about to ask,
or if that position doesn't exist in other parts of the state, that is essentially the guy who goes around to the beverage self-serve stations and just make sure they're tidy, clean, make sure the soda is stocked, make sure the cups and coffee is filled, things like that. So it was a step down from a bar back or a bartender. So it was a stepping stone, if you will.
Cool.
And so,
Also, I guess they would need that at the casino because there's so many people that are there.
oh yeah.
Okay.
And they always want their coffee and soda, freak soda.
Why is they gonna get pissed?
Oh yeah, I've seen that too, but that's a story for another day. But so I was doing that, nothing glamorous about the job. I was content really with the job. I was still in college at the time, but I kind of wanted more excitement.
Sure.
So I actually applied to be a security officer at the casino. And I remember going into this panel style interview, like 3 other people, the manager and then like the shift supervisors. And they were like interviewing me. They thought I was a good candidate, but they couldn't figure out where to put me because of my school hours. So it was hard to work with. Like, well, if we put you on overnights, will you be tired, going to school? And would that affect, your job? And we can't put you on the mornings because you're going to school during the morning.
Right.
So that shut that down. I knew they made more than what I was making as a bar porter. So that's why another reason why I was trying to get it. And so that got shot down. And at the time, as a bar porter, there's a lot of downtime. So I got to chat up some of the cocktail waitresses, if you will. The hot girls of the casino, So there was one I was particularly fond of. And we were just talking about life. We were around the same age. She always came with issues she had about life. And I would talk to her about some issues. And so I brought up the fact that I got turned down from this security job at the casino we worked at.
Right.
And she was like, well, a guy she was talking to, and I felt rejected there.
Oh, no.
So a guy she was talking to was actually in the world of asset protection, if you will.
Okay.
And he was actually doing it at Macy's, of all places. So she was telling me about, how much money he was making, how cool the job is, and like, oh, you should look into this. And I was like, okay, I will. And so,
you got it.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. So, yeah, so I looked into it, and like many people, I didn't know about the world of asset protection. I didn't know it was as big and as crazy as, I would come to learn that it is. So I, just went in there, applied. I was actually under the assumption that I would be one of the visual security guards when I applied, but I had this phone interview. She was like, oh, no, that's not what you're going to be doing. We want you for this asset protection detective role. I'm like, detective?
Ooh.
I'm like, fancy.
The plot thickens.
Exactly. And so, I was excited. It was actually for the Galleria, the St. Louis Galleria.
Hell yeah.
Position. But then going into the interview, she scheduled the interview with the district manager, and then he gave me a call. He was like, can you meet me over in Mid Rivers Mall? And I remember that day because I was like debating if I was even going to go, because I was like, well, I signed up for the Galleria. It's closer. Like, they're going to make me work in Mid Rivers. That's far.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to drive out there.
It's a long drive.
Yeah.
Good old St. Chuck.
Yeah, that area. But, I went ahead and went. I interviewed, and I guess I killed it because I got offered the position on the spot, at a whole whopping $10.50, which back in 2015, I thought I was really, really doing something.
Back in those days.
Yeah, man, listen.
That was a little more money.
It was a little money. But I will say this, and I was having a conversation with a former colleague of mine, Christy. Shout out to Christy. We did a lot of work in the AP world for little money.
Yeah.
So
I have heard that that's pretty common, unless you were, I guess, working in those Garda World positions or like private security firms.
And then that's one thing too. You get to the security class where, you're just in there with Garda World. You're in there with like a whole bunch of different security officers. And I think you get to this question later, so I won't speak on it. But like, the teacher of the class is like a former cop or whatever. And he's like, to all the loss prevention, asset protection guys, for what you guys do and to make so little money, it's not worth it. you know, you got a question on here later, and we'll get to it, and I'll bring it back up.
You save it for special time. So, what's the kind of the mindset you have to have for this job? And before you answer, I want to kind of set the stage a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I asked that, like, I see you're like 5'11".
On a good day.
On a good day.
You know, when it's warm.
I'm 5'6" on a good day. Like, I'm probably like 5'4" in reality, though.
Right.
Definitely, like, when they hire people, they want to have someone who's a deterrent, like we've been saying consistently in this episode. When I see you're a tall guy,
right,
who is a big person, so immediately when you have a vagabond, a ruffian, a rogue, an urchin, if you will, you're trying to like stir up trouble in the Galleria, and I say this with my hands menacingly.
Yeah.
And they see someone who's an imposing figure, they kind of like just like back down immediately. So you have that already naturally, which is amazing. Which is why people have actually told me, like, why don't you do security? I'm like, I would not be good. I'm too nice.
Well,
and I'm too small for this job.
I mean, don't sell yourself short there.
I already am.
Pun intended. No pun intended. You know, the good thing about, I guess, you know, even while I'm being interviewed, I've done this for 6 years. I've seen people come who are my size or bigger who do really well. I've seen them do really bad at the same time.
Okay.
I've seen guys your size. I've seen, you know, women of shorter stature who do really great, who work their way up to certain positions. But at the same time, I've seen, you know, them do not so well.
Right.
Them being a certain size.
So it's not necessarily of qualification for the job.
Yeah. You would hope, right? I've been under certain leadership where they feel like that's the biggest thing is someone who's imposing, who will scare the bad guys, right? But that doesn't necessarily make you good for all the other things that you have to do in this job.
Okay.
But then sometimes, like you said, you had a good word for it, the mindset.
Yeah. So what's your mindset for the job?
My mindset is different from probably what the company will teach you, like any company really. But sometimes you got to be willing to not be afraid. You have to know when to let it go, but not to be afraid at the same time.
Okay.
And how to be stern, how to be, like you said, an imposing figure. But sometimes you don't even have to use your body size. Sometimes I think it's about your personality, what you give off. Because, you know, you can command someone to do something just by the tone of your voice and how you present yourself.
Interesting.
I've seen that work for people even smaller than yourself. And, you know, it works for them. They've had successful AP careers. I've seen the guys like my size who maybe lack the education part of it or the will to learn the other things that go into the job that people don't think about when they think of asset protection, because the point we made earlier was that we're not necessarily security. There's elements of security in it, but when you learn what asset protection is, you also have to be an investigator as well, because it's not just the shoplifters coming in and stealing from the company, right? There's also internals that are happening. There's associates who get hired just for like the summer, just so they can, you know, like they don't care, so they're just gonna take a few things here or there, take some cash.
Right.
We've even had management people who get into these positions and they think they can shortcut certain systems, certain procedures. You know, we have vendors, we have a lot of things where you have to be able to work the cameras, you have to be able to work the programs that we have to kind of find all these things.
Sure.
And stop it from happening.
You know, they made this game, The Godfather, the movie. They made one and two of them. The reason I'm bringing it up is because there's a part in the game where you play like the first Godfather. You basically are the person who like puts the gun behind the toilet. You're the one who goes and kills the 5 heads of the families. Like you're basically the plot device for all the events of the game. The reason I'm bringing this up is that there's an interesting statement that they had Michael Corleone say to you as the character. He's like, you can go about dominating New York, so like through intimidation, payoffs, killing, etc., etc. He says this really interesting line: one man with a briefcase can steal more than 500 men with guns, which I thought was really interesting. As I was going over this and hearing you talk today, I've been thinking about that line over and over and over. You can get more done with your words than you actually think you can, is where it comes back to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, is just being almost like a fast talker in a way.
Yeah.
I'm not, but I think that's why it's kind of like a weird thing where, in a video game, you have different characters that have different strengths, right?
Totally.
Like someone's stronger, someone's faster, in a fighting game. It's the same way in the AP world, I feel like. There's guys like me who are the big, strong guys who we don't have to use words so much. Right. We can just kind of intimidate you to get you to do what we want you to do. But then you have, good talkers who can talk you into doing anything. And you're like, how the fuck did I even get here?
I bought so much today.
Right. Like, how the fuck? But I think that's the beautiful thing about it. I don't think it's a one size fit all job. I think
that's interesting.
There's different people who can do it and do it well. I've seen that. I've seen certain stereotypes where the job necessarily doesn't fit. And I think we'll get into that later as well. But for example, and this is not a diss really, but former police or law enforcement or people in that security field with the uniform badge or even the weapon, people are used to having that authority because they have this certain equipment, but you take that away from them, you kind of notice that they're not as charismatic to, talk someone back on their own, or they don't even have the size, so they don't have that component as well.
Right.
And so you're without those things, and then you're just stumbling around trying to find your way.
I was just about to ask you, what's in your utility belt?
So we're not funded like Batman. So
I don't think anyone's funded like Batman.
So it's and that goes back to the point I was saying earlier, right, when I was in security class and the instructor was like, for what you guys do, you guys aren't paid enough, because we're essentially stopping guys as big as me who are on the sole mission of getting out of your store with your merchandise, and you're armed with your words. And, before COVID, then how much I just say about that or not. Sometimes you're armed with your, your own hands to actually subdue someone.
Right.
But there's a limit to everything, right?
Right.
And everybody has cameras now. So, be,
cognizant of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be cautious of, the media presence, how far you're willing to go. Don't end up like some of these police officers who get in trouble for how they handle, suspects.
And you're not saying like, know where the dead zones are so you can beat the crap out of them. Like you're saying like, no
comment on that. There definitely been some people that pushed anybody to that point, but no, not that necessarily, but certain companies will let you, and it's changed a lot. Certain companies will let you have the free reign of using handcuffs, for example, to, get someone to comply.
Sure.
If you're trying to bring someone back for shoplifting. But what I say, be cognizant of the media is like everyone's watching. You're in a big retailer, you're in a store. Even if you're not in a big store, like I worked at Home Depot, there's a bunch of different exits, but there's always someone there, right?
Right.
And so any interaction someone sees, they're going to be interested. Who is that made that quote about, you see a basketball game here, you see a baseball game here on the street, and then you see a fight, people are going to be drawn to the fight.
Oh, yeah.
So
always.
You can't talk someone back. You won't talk everyone back. That's just the way it goes. That's another thing, too. These guys are professionals. They do it for a living.
Right.
You wouldn't think it. You would think like shoplifting is just for something that kids do or something you do when you're young. Or
I mean, I worked retail, too. Everybody does it.
Yeah, everyone does it.
Yeah.
And then you imagine everybody doesn't come back.
Really weird, too. Yeah. It's like, you really want to steal that? I'm like, okay, fine.
I've learned that people will steal anything as long as it's not mounted to the ground.
Yeah.
If you don't got it mounted to the ground, then don't be shocked if it walks out one day. But yeah, so just be careful of people filming,
because they also could be filming at the wrong time.
They have the perfect knack for that,
right? Filming at the wrong time, or like in between the encounters, so like perpetrator could be doing something or suspect could be doing something, and then a security officer responds, and that's typically when the cameras come out. Now, whether or not it's right or wrong is not what I'm saying, but it's also like the timing of the camera that turns on is also a factor as well.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. Speaking of that, you know any guys who have taken the job a little too seriously?
Yeah, I mean, going back to that example with the cops, right? The former cops who kind of get into this position. Yeah, I've seen that go really bad.
No doubt.
For some of them. And like I said, it's kind of because of that mentality of power. Sometimes people get on this ego trip or power trip, if you will. Once you give them a badge of any sort,
And you have a badge.
Yeah, you're supposed to stop them and show your badge. You get laughed at, but it's a badge. But yeah, I've met guys who take their job really seriously to the point where it's almost borderline discrimination sometimes. But those guys never last long.
Oh, they don't?
No, they never do. I mean,
on the whole, at least.
Yeah, they'll get themselves fired just because. I've met guys who broke policy. Sometimes we have I used to always hear stories about the wild, wild west of the asset protection era back in the day before they made all the rules.
When was that, and when did they start making the rules?
I don't know when they started making the rules, because when I came in 2015, I was with a lot of older managers who would be like, back in my day, we would have chased that guy all the way to the parking garage across the street, and we would have
1980s.
Yeah, tackled them, and I don't know if the 80s, early 90s. I think or even early 2000s. It was if you're comfortable with doing it, go do it. I think back in the day.
Sure.
Nowadays, it's completely changed.
I'm kind of glad it has. Though.
Yeah, I mean, because even I think about some of the guys I've stopped. I'm like, even if I could physically run after you to this parking garage, I'm just not cool with that idea. But yeah, I've heard stories of people chasing people to a parking garage. They get them cornered, and then the guy jumping off the ledge of the parking garage to try to make an escape.
What?
Yeah, I've heard people chasing people through parking lot, hopping in mall security car, and then chasing them down. Heard about guys jumping on the roof of people's cars, trying to get them to get out.
Wow.
So,
I mean, fear kicks in. I guess you do crazy stuff.
Yeah, so it was a wild, wild west, but back in the day, but rules. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I've seen people take it really seriously, they are the law essentially, when ease up a little bit.
Yeah, you have no federal claim.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's mostly people, former law enforcement, former security officers who are used to the uniform.
Any former spec ops that have told you, at least?
I haven't met any former spec ops. I've had people who used to be in military, so they have the military experience. I've met people who actually practice MMA, who've done it. There's one guy, really great guy. He doesn't do it anymore, but I think he found it back when we were hands-on as a kind of a stress release. And being that he was in that MMA world, he was actually probably the one guy that you actually wanted to tie you up in some type of hole,
because he knew what he was doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I after all the George Floyd incidents, I've been learning. So I've been doing some BJJ on the side, and I don't want to take over this interview, but I asked my instructor, I was like, okay, I need to know the difference between blood chokes and airway chokes. We need to go over this. And he's like, that's a damn good point. Let's do that. I'm like, yes, it is a damn good point. We should have covered this a long time ago.
Right.
But whatever.
That's a good point, because you're practicing the martial arts. I wonder if anybody ever thought that's a good thing to know in these law enforcement security roles.
So a lot of them have spilled over to come and do. It's still kind of a gray zone.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'll say that we have had some interaction with police officers and stuff like that to train them and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the presentations I've given earlier, definitely there's been a lot of spillover with the Inosanto and martial arts world with that. There's pictures with some FBI guys and stuff like that, Secret Service. I've heard stories like that. I've heard people talk about that.
Right.
But yeah, it's this weird gray zone of training like that happening, but also it not being taught well. And typically it's not taught well. Like that's another thing. Police officers need to be not only selected differently, but also trained differently. How you're trained definitely, and how you're selected for that process. It's a multi-layered approach that needs to be rectified.
Right.
They spend so much time using ballistic training as opposed it's like less than a year. Like the cosmetology schools do more training than police officers in terms of that, which is terrifying. Like I have a great haircut, but like I might not go home alive tonight. Like that's the thing. So how you're selected for it, how you're trained for it, and everything goes into effect. I do know of a police officer, and I was like, yeah, so like, what kind of holds do you guys do? Like, well, I just asked him, and he's like, oh yeah, there's one of them that we do, and he just took his finger and he shoved it. Like, there's a little hole, there's like a little like bend in your collarbone, that has like a U shape, and he just stuck his finger there, and I was like, oh, okay, thank you. I didn't ask you to do it on me.
Right.
It was kind of a dick move. But
it's better to show than to tell.
I was like, you could have just told me and not done that. And he's like, yeah, we don't do any katas, we don't do any of this stuff, but we got some colds, and it happens, but it's very regional. I think that's the best way I can explain it. It's not done federally, and it's something that needs to be addressed, because the Derek Chauvin case, he should not have been laying on him for that long. That's if you're absolutely going to put someone in a hold, you don't stomp on their neck with your knee. Like that's not going to subdue them. That's going to kill them, which is what happened. Yeah. Anyhow, we're talking about you today. So speaking of that, what kind of like physicality or techniques are you allowed to use on suspects? And you've kind of talked about this.
Yeah.
So like, have you run after them? Have you?
I've always,
used clone jutsu and thrown like 6 of you at him.
I wish there was like a class that taught you all the necessary clone jutsus and
It'd be great.
BJJ holds, but they don't exist.
See, that's my problem with it. I'm like, this is not good. This is something that should be taught this.
As far as running, we've definitely ran to make an apprehension. There definitely such thing as how far you can go, cutoffs and things like that. But I've definitely chased people back in my heyday.
Like 2 years ago?
Enough not to get me fired. Whatever that, I don't even care anymore.
No, you say heyday, and I'm like, this was like 5 years ago.
Right,
It wasn't that long ago.
Back in the day. I'm not even really in the world anymore, so I can speak freely about it.
Please do.
We would tackle. We would take people down to the ground to the best of our abilities.
Sure.
However much WWF Raw would teach us.
Yeah. Cage match.
Right. So one of the companies I work for, we were hands-on. And we were allowed to use handcuffs like I spoke about before. Yeah. They do tell you when applying handcuffs, you really want compliance, right? Yeah. To handcuff people. We never had fucking compliance. Oh, God. Handcuffing people. So as you imagine, that was a nightmare. And it goes back to, even reflecting back on it, there was a lot of people to where, we were in these wrestling matches, drag out brawls, and we're just trying to like get them to comply and handcuff them. Yeah. Yeah, I can think back to a lot of incidents like that where I wish like, man, I'm not trained for this, or, not even fit enough for this. But yeah, I could think of one incident where it was like, man, this was like a 15-minute wrestling match. You go back and look at the table like, oh, it was only 2 minutes.
Oh my God, that's a thing. You get tunnel vision, like time, like when we've done safe sparring, but like the intensity turned up, and man, like I definitely have gotten tunnel vision. I've definitely felt like that was 5 hours long. And then we like talked to somebody, I'm like, we still have an hour of class left. I'm like, fuck, really? What was that?
Still here?
Yeah. So I know what you mean.
Yeah. I can think of one story to kind of, let people know how physical it got. Yeah. It was me, another detective. We went to go apprehend this guy. He had stolen some merchandise. I don't even recall what it was, but he was walking out with bags full. And we go to stop the guy at our garage exit. which is really, I mean, I guess the camera angles is very like limited in that garage, I will say.
What you're saying is a lot of people play like Pokemon cards when no one's looking.
Yeah, no. Illegal Pokemon tournaments are going down there. There's nothing no one can do about it.
You gotta catch them all. Man.
Exactly, we do. Yeah, that was the quota. Gotta catch them all. So we stopped the guy, identified ourselves as security. As you imagine, he wasn't too happy with that. He didn't comply, and so we get into this wrestling match with this guy. Like me and this other guy, we're trying to bring him to the ground, trying to get a hold of him. Mm-hmm. We radio for help from one of our visual security officers at the time to come help us, come assist. And he ran up and, he's helping us. He ends up kind of getting in on it. And we're about to get this guy to, get him handcuffed and get this situation sorted. And then, like, his friend from the garage ran in. Was like, what's going on?
Okay.
And so the friend runs in and, like, runs for the bags that were dropped and, like, tries to pick those up.
Oh.
And so the visual security officer and my partner, like, got up and, like, went after this guy to stop him from trying to steal. And so I'm still wrestling with the guy on the ground, and somehow he just got on top of me, and before I knew it, I was like on my knees trying to get up, and he had like kneed me in that, like, the temple of my head. And so I took that shot, and then the other two stopped the friend from stealing. The friend ran out, and so they went back on the other guy. But yeah, we ended up getting them handcuffed and getting them to come back. But that's how physical it used to get back in the day, to say the least. Looking back on it, reflecting, this stuff was all on the ground, so we probably should have let them run away. But I think sometimes when you're in those moments, you're like, screw that. Like, we just had this, I want to say long ass brawl, but this is another example of tunnel vision, because you're like, we were in that garage for 15 minutes. We were telling our boss what happened. Like, like I got kicked in the head, and, we're all exhausted. The cops come and like, what happened? We got reports from the people watching that, people were fighting in the garage, and we're like, it was a long 15-minute brawl. we were viewing videos that, get it all together. Like, we were only in that garage for 3 minutes. We weren't even in there that long. It felt like we ran a marathon. But that's an example of how physical it can get or has gotten.
Your head okay?
Yeah,
Cool.
Couple screws knocked loose, but
not a concussion, I hope, right?
Oh no, I don't think it was that serious.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
Still here.
I mean, you've been here for the past year, so yeah.
This is exactly.
So definitely your life is in potential danger when you take this kind of a job.
Absolutely. There have been examples.
Has that been one, or was that kind of just like, oh, this is a big deal, but my life doesn't feel in danger? But like, have you had moments where you felt like, oh shit, this is a big deal?
Yeah, this is real. I'll get to the ass story later.
We're all excited.
It's actually a funny story. But the first time, I would say, we had apprehended this guy, bag full of clothes. We had apprehended him at a door that was close to our office. So me and the other detective like grabbed hold of him and was like bringing him back into the office without handcuffing him. Mm-hmm. And, he's screaming and saying all these types of things. And like, we're trying to get him to calm down, comply. And before we can really do a proper pat down search of him for weapons, which is what we're always supposed to do when you get him back to the office, he pulls out a knife.
Oh, shit.
And like kind of holding it at us.
Brandishing it in front of you.
Yeah. And my partner, who was at the time he always got hot on incidents like that. So he was like still trying to go for the guy.
Okay.
And so I'm like trying to get him back now. So now I'm like, telling my partner like, chill, back off.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah. To let him go. I'm like, let him go. And even the other officer who was coming in, the other asset protection detective was coming in, I was like, get out of here, back off. And so that was one incident where we were like in close proximity of a guy with a knife, and we just let him go. Another example.
Did you take the knife from him?
No, I mean, he had the knife, and like I said before, we're not trained.
Shit.
We can't. I didn't know.
That's fair.
I seen the movies on how to remove the knife.
Knife fights get terrifying.
Yeah.
You could die before you know it.
Exactly.
There's a quote that we hear in knife training of any kind, and it's like, winners drip, losers gush. So no one comes out clean. Yeah.
So we let him go. I would just like, getting my partner to back off to let him out the office, because that's all he wanted at the end of the day was to get out of the situation. I didn't think he wanted to hurt us, but in those situations, why even risk it? Because it's always your safety first. Another incident I had was while I was working Marshalls, which was funny because the boy who did it, he actually got out of juvie that morning.
Oh, no.
And him and his girlfriend had went to the Kmart back when we had Kmarts, right?
Whoa. Forgot about those.
Right. They had went to the Kmart earlier that day, and they had actually stole from Kmart, and they had actually sucker punched the security officer there and got away.
All in the same day?
Yeah, this is all in the same day. What a crazy Friday, right?
What a day.
So he did that, and so, this is what I found out after my incident with him. So he came to Marshall's, him and his girlfriend, they got a cart, and they were just loading up merchandise. There are things we look for when we're doing this type of work. They tell you like eye movement, shopping habits, clothing, behaviors. And so their behavior was like, they just didn't give a fuck at all. For like associates were coming up back and they need help, they were like, leave me alone, I'm shopping. And they're just picking up stuff, not even looking at size, color,
right,
how normal shoppers behave. So, they were just selecting things, like throwing it in the cart, just men's, women's, kids, purses. They were just going to town. And so, I was watching them, but it gets to a point in the Marshall environment anyway, I was the only security in the store. So it got to a certain point where I was like, all right, even if I stop these guys, they're not going to comply at this point, because you just get a feeling. And when you're going that big, it's kind of hard to get anybody to come back by talking to them. So I was like, let me go to the floor. Went to the floor, made my presence known to them. Like they knew I was security. Walked around them a couple of times, hung out in the areas they were at. But, they just kept going. You could tell there was a little nervousness from the girlfriend, but the boy was like, they're still going to go and still going to do this. And so when it got to the point where it looked like they were done and they were just trying to figure out their escape, I went to the front of the store near the door. Well, there's only one way for them to get out. So at the very point. Yeah. So I was like, at the very least, I'm going to, get the cart from them before they, get out the store. Or at least to the point where I could tip it over and then some of the stuff falls and they won't get away with anything. I let my store manager know, be ready to call the police when this goes down, because I know they're not going to come back.
Yeah.
And so as they're approaching the front, I'm waiting. And AP, you kind of always want to talk to them first before you make any movements, really. And so before the girl was pushing the cart, and before she even got the cart close to the front, the dude was coming up, and he was like look like he was gonna walk out, and he didn't have anything. So I didn't want to stop him.
Sure.
And so as he got to the front, he pulled out mace from his waistband, maced me, like dead in the eyes. That was the first time I ever got mace. There were other times, but that was the
Plural?
one. Yeah.
Oh God.
But that was the first time, and that was the most direct time I've ever been maced. Yeah, it was a really bad situation.
I like how, I want everyone to know, he's saying this with a smile too, which always gets me about Lance too. He's like, yeah, we were like, my life was threatened and everything. Well, yeah, what a day.
It was. I mean, looking back on it, there's like, you know how people say, just let me clock out first and we can, go a couple rounds. And I really wanted to go a couple rounds with that kid.
I mean, I don't blame you. Yeah.
And at first I was pissed because I was under the assumption that he got away with everything too. So like they pushed the cart out and they were in the parking lot. The cops ended up catching them.
Okay.
And ended up catching them actually trying to push the cart onto a bus.
What?
So they actually stopped them on the bus and they caught him. And
Okay.
yeah, and that's where I learned that, he had just turned 17 in Missouri, 17-year adult. He had just turned 17 that day.
Okay.
And they released him from juvie.
He aged out.
Yeah. And so they were like, yeah, and then he even went to Kmart and punched other security. And then that was the thing too. I was like, I would have took the fucking punch. Like you at that point, you're giving me a chance to fight.
At least you're done with the punch.
Yeah, exactly. You punched me, or I see a punch coming. You could duck, dodge, block it, throw your own punch. I'm like, give me a fighting chance. When you use mace, it's all over. So I was heated on so many.
Oh, man.
On so many levels with that kid. But yeah, that was one. There's so many times that my life was, I guess, technically in danger.
Gotcha.
One of the times, and I've been talking about the ass story.
Yeah, like what's the ass story? We all want to know.
So there was this shoplifter, old man, about late 50s, early 60s. I had actually caught him at Marshall stealing. Well, didn't catch him. I tried to stop him at the door. He wouldn't comply, and he actually got out into the parking lot, but I had the police waiting for him. And so he actually walks with a limp. So this is old man like hobbling around trying to get away from the cop and me, but we actually get him and get him arrested that day. So that was in Marshall. So that was 2017.
Okay. Yeah.
Between then and there, it's 2019 now. I hadn't seen him. I'm back at Macy's, and I see this old guy.
That's
kind of
wild.
Like, oh shit, it's him. And like,
how you been?
Like I didn't think much of it, and the first time I saw him at Macy's, it was like, oh shit, it's him. And then like, he noticed me. He noticed security and presence. He really didn't remember me, but he noticed security and he was upset and he had left out. But on that particular incident, actually his colleague had dropped his phone and he was calling the phone, and I had got his name off the phone.
Oh, okay.
And his name was such and such. Well, I guess he won't listen to it. It was called Rick, which could be a nickname for anything.
Richard, yeah.
So, I was like, oh, so your name is Rick, because I didn't remember his name from Marshall, so I'm not good with names.
It's okay.
Good with faces, but not names.
I am the same way, yeah.
But, so I'm like, oh, Rick, huh? My thought was, the next time he came, if he tried to do something, I would antagonize him with it. And so
right.
He would come in, he wanted to steal, but he noticed security the next day or something. He just didn't feel comfortable doing it. I'm like, all right, I'll see you around, Rick. And he looked back at me and was like, how do you know me? I was like, oh, I just know you from around. He was like, nah, man, how you know me?
Oh, no.
I'm like, I don't know you. I just know you from around. I'm like, man, you motherfuckers better stop playing with me.
Oh,
He's
no.
like,
oh, no.
I don't play that shit. I got a gun and everything.
Oh.
Like, I'll shoot you in your ass, man. And I just remember not taking him seriously and just with a grin on my face, like, that's such a specific place to shoot someone. Like,
it really
to make a
is.
stretch. Like,
It really is.
most people will like, oh, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to shoot you. Like, I've had that. But for him to be like, I'm going to shoot you in your ass. I was like, wow.
It's like, I'm going to get you right above the clavicle.
That's such a specific place. I've gotten no stress all the time. There was a couple times actually, but there was like one legit time we did see someone like bust out a gun outside. Like, he went to a truck, grabbed a gun, and like waved it. And
jeez,
one of my partners had to like get our boss to like come back in the store because the boss was still like nah, we gonna do something. Like, nah, man, they got a gun. We inside. So, unfortunately, with loss prevention, that comes with the territory. Unfortunately, I know loss prevention who's been stabbed. I've heard stories of people getting shot. There was an incident years ago with Home Depot where the AP staff member got shot. So,
wow,
it's a dangerous field.
Yeah.
In all honesty.
Yeah,
you never know where someone's mindset is, or what they're going through, or who they are.
That's true. Like how much of it is their environment, how much of it is them just being a dick.
Yeah.
Like you never. It's hard to say in that moment that you know them.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever happened to the ass man?
He would come back.
Keep on threatening to shoot you in your ass.
He never really threatened my ass again, so my ass thanks him. But you get to a point, these guys just keep coming. They keep coming back. He's one of those reoccurring characters that would always show up. He stopped showing up recently. I wonder what happened to him. He was old as fuck. But
tired of shooting people in the ass.
I mean, I always made the joke. We were making the joke, and we were only making it because he threatened my ass. But he would walk with that limp, and you would see him hobbling. Like, that's how you knew it was him. It was like, someone must have shot him in the ass. And so now, for revenge, he goes around shooting people in the ass. Yeah. Just shooting them in the ass. But, yeah.
What's it like being, especially in the light of political climate and social climate? Man. What's it like? Oh, God. What's it like being an African-American asset protection agent?
Actually, and this is just me, and it might be wild, but it's actually way easier being black doing this job.
I kind of believe that, yeah.
Yeah. And I've said this to white coworkers, not so much in the past, but with everything since after Mike Brown.
Okay.
Like, I feel like when Mike Brown happened,
and
then everything after, it's like, this job has to be really difficult for you to do as a white, Caucasian, female, male.
Yeah.
Because in this job, right, you can identify someone as a, shoplifter, and you go to stop them. Well, you don't even have to go to stop them. Say you're just trying to stop them from stealing in the store. You go to do those things like deter and burn and provide customer service. And the first thing, if the assailant is African American, the first thing that they will say is, "You're watching me because I'm black.
Right.
You're being racist." And so I've seen that get people in trouble or hinder their ability to do this job if they are white, in fact. I've seen an AP staff get, accused of profiling for only watching African Americans that day. So I've seen that, and I've seen them be fired for it. Rightfully so. I think on the flip side of that, if I did that,
you get away with it.
Yeah, I get away with it.
Yeah, and it definitely can be used as a shield. That's 100% true.
I think there's been times where I worked on a team where it's me and then the rest of the team is white. And only sometimes, like a small percentage of the time, I can be that saving token black guy that kind of gets the perception that they're not being racist per se, but it doesn't work 100% of the time.
Right.
If you're going after African American clientele, right or wrong, if they, rightfully stole, but you're a group of white people approaching this guy,
doesn't look great.
It doesn't look great. And that's why, you got to be aware of your surroundings, who's recording. I was in part of a situation where it was a little girl, like 15, 16, like maybe only 70 pounds soaking wet. And she had ran from a white white male, well, two white males. She had ran from them, and then I was actually coming out the office to like open the office door for them so we could do the paperwork.
Okay.
And when I'm coming out the office, I just see her running, and them like running after her. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And like, so I blocked the entrance so she couldn't get out, and they tackle her, get her to the ground, and we're trying to handcuff her, and she's just like squirming, and at the same time, you're trying to like be gentle because, like I said, she was a really small girl, and
Right.
like you're trying to get a hold of her and get control.
Appropriate response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you had like black women like getting really upset and like filming and things like that. So situations turn ugly like that. And so, when you ask how can you do it as a African American, I think how can you do it as a white individual?
That's like very interesting point. Yeah.
You're always under the microscope.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not, but I think we are in different ways. I think we're when I go into like for a short time, I was doing like a multi-store role where I would go to other stores than my primary one and kind of work there and work, doing the same job.
Right.
But the associates don't know you, or even if they come to know you, they still are unsure about you. So they're calling on you, like they're calling your partner, or they only feel comfortable talking to your white partner, or, they think you're just as suspicious as the person that's stealing.
Ooh.
And then too, just like you're being overlooked.
I'm sorry,
this way, any job, like for promotions and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the world we live in. Is kind of fucked up.
And I'm sorry about that.
I mean, it is messed up. But then you get to play this game in the politic world where sometimes you got to meet your quota of black people in certain positions, and so you can be a chess piece like that.
I mean, I definitely was when I worked for SLU. So yeah.
Yeah,
they needed Browntown to help them out, man. So I got it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was a good question though, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is something I always when I see like this bright-eyed, blue-eyed white man entering the field, so excited, I'm like, you gonna have a rough breakup. It is so weird to say that as an African American. I'm like, they gonna treat you so unfair. You ain't gonna know what to do. This pressure.
He's like, he's probably a nice guy too.
I mean, honestly, I look back at some of the white colleagues I meet, and they're never. Well, some of them aren't like always like that police, like former cop type. Sometimes they're even, really great guys. Sometimes they just haven't been around enough African Americans to know how to talk to them. But then, like, you as their coworker, kind of tell them things, teach them things, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And you see that transformation. But
wow.
Sometimes they're good guys, but then sometimes they have this perceived notion that you look and dress a certain way that you're going to do something.
Yeah. It's human beings do all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, that's all the questions I had. Any other points you want to put on?
I think there was one question in here. We might have talked about it earlier when you asked if any wild stories stand out. Just going into the job, going back to when I first got hired, it was kind of like I just didn't know that shoplifting was like people's jobs. I didn't know how serious it was as a career. We've had different crews come in and steal. People will actually tell certain people to go work at a store just so they can have somebody on the inside, and you're just like, what the fuck is this?
Seriously? Like they'll throw in like double agents?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
And they refer to it as organized retail crime. So we have like a lot of ORC groups. That's like the abbreviation for it. They come in, they hit up every Macy's.
You got some orcs coming in?
Yep, we got orcs.
Okay.
A whole bunch of them.
Okay.
They'll, you'll notice that they'll hit up other retailers, and you're just like, wow, there's one lady, I swear to God, if she ever writes a book, I will be the first person in line for like a signed copy. Because she was around, because when I first heard of her in 2015, she was there, she was a presence, she was a problem. And I would hear from managers that she used to be around from the Famous Bar days. Back before Macy's, with Macy's, it was like Famous Bar.
I always hated the words Famous Bar whenever I was a kid. I was so happy when Macy's bought them out. I was like, thank God. This was the dumbest title. Famous Bar. I'm like, I hate that.
Yeah, but she was a problem for years. She still is. There was a recent incident right before COVID. This is actually the crazy thing about it. was like right before COVID, like the day before Macy's shut down. We had caught one of her associates and her associate's son, who were like a part of her group. She was known booster, known threat.
Whoa.
And we had caught her, and I was just thinking, like, I started in 2015 trying to catch this lady, and we finally caught her like years later in 2020, and we catch her. It was like a $16,000 case.
What?
And, you know, we had this big ass drag out brawl to get her and her son to come back, because it was like, we're not letting you guys go.
That's 16 grand. Wow.
Yeah. So we had caught her biggest like catch of any of our careers. I think honestly, I feel like I'm in the twilight years of doing this. I'm pretty sure I'm done really after this year.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But I feel like that was the biggest catch ever that I made or was a part of. Just insane.
Yeah.
Just insane. The amount of what people can do.
Wow, that many years. I mean, you guys are like basically underpaid feds at that point.
Yeah, I mean,
that's ridiculous.
That's the crazy thing. It's the whole world. And then I should say too, like, I should make this point, like the pay has gotten better.
Okay.
Over the years. You know, your certain positions in certain companies like Target, even Macy's, where you can make up to, you know, 60 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
If you rise up to the top, you can make it a career. It's a viable career, but what you got to do to get there is, I'm still trying to figure it out. Well, I was trying to figure it out, but apparently I never learned it. But man, yeah, it just wasn't what I thought it was going into it. And you brought up the point that I'm like such a big guy and like kind of intimidating. Like, I remember our first stop was on a guy who stole like maybe 2 or 3 packages of underwear. And he wouldn't comply. And so, like, I'm this, you know, new guy who, you know, got to shadow the other detectives and stuff. And the detective and the supervisor go to stop the guy. And the guy's like, nah, I ain't coming back. And I thought, you know, well, shit, that's just the end of it. We tried. We did our best, did the best we could. And they were like, nope. And my supervisor, who was a woman, shout out to Laura. She did not take shit. She just grabbed him and like tossed him to the ground, and like him and her and like the other detective were like wrestling with the guy, getting him in handcuffs, and I'm just standing there like frozen, like what the fuck is this? And so she yells at me like get here and, you know, stand up, you know, sit on him. Yeah. So I ended up sitting on the guy so they can get him handcuffed, and I'm like timidly like grabbing his hand like, oh shit, so to help them like handcuff him.
So it was like very early on.
Yeah, this was like the first time I ever seen them stop somebody, and I'm like, what? What is going on? Yeah, kind of in the beginning years I was like so timid to actually like get in there and do that type of stuff, but then it became like second nature almost.
Yeah, to
kind of kick it into gear. But then also too, like you're aware, naturally I'm a nice guy.
Yeah, you're a big dude, but like the moment like I wore that One Punch Man t-shirt, I was like, what?
Right. Like I feel like when people get past like my male bitch face, they're like, you know, oh, he's like the sweetest guy. Like he wouldn't, I can't see you doing this line of work. And I've even like questioned myself doing it, because I'm like, I'm not this person. I don't like to hurt people. But,
yeah, you really are not. I was just like, oh, he's just a quiet dude. And then I heard you did that kind of job. I was like, well, you can definitely rock it. And then I hear you talking about Naruto, and I'm like, or One Punch Man, and I'm like, oh, okay, new side,
right?
New side right here.
That's what I say. It takes, you know, all kinds to do the job.
Yeah, that's been a learning experience for me today. And I'm not saying that to be funny. I really am not. I think that's really cool. Yeah, I think that's basically everything.
Yeah, man, I think that's it. Asset protection is actually a really big world.
Sounds like it. Way bigger than I ever expected.
Yeah, it's definitely more interesting, you know, definitely more to it than I think people imagine. Super, you know, helpful job for retailers, you know, to have when they can, you know, afford to have them. Yeah, man. I'm glad that we brought up this topic. I'm glad I got to share it.
Yeah, I was excited because I was like, I've never met anyone like this before. This is news.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for sharing. Initially, I remember we were preparing for this episode, and I go, Lance, I'm like, are we gonna have enough info to go for an hour? And you just start laughing.
Oh, I mean, there's things that I didn't even mention, but yeah, I mean,
we'll mention them down the road.
they'll come up. They'll come up.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in, people. Stay tuned.
Yep. Hey, fan peeps, thanks for joining, and as always, we appreciate any feedback. You can follow us on our Facebook page, They Need a Hobby, and also at TNAH Pod on Instagram and Twitter.
Hopefully one day we'll find a hobby and maybe even be one of the cool kids. Peace. Yeah, when you wake up, your spine is straighter. So that's the thing. You take every inch you can get. Every inch you can get.
Every inch. You take every inch, Uncle.
Every inch you can get. Every inch. All the inches.